Good afternoon. My name is Brad Hunt, and I am chair of the history department here at Loyola University Chicago. I'm here on behalf of our many partners for this program, including the university libraries, the Polish Studies program, and the Department of History. I want to start by thanking Patti Ray. Patti, will you raise your hand? Patti, right here in the back, her tireless work helped make today's program possible. Since 1987 and for over 30 years after, she served Loyola students as the Hillel director on campus, and she continues to do amazing work in the community. I'd also like to thank Jocelyn Chang. Jocelyn from the university libraries for all her work in producing today's program. This is just an excellent example, I think, of collaboration across this campus. I'm delighted to see our full house, our crowd today. I want to thank you all for being here to learn more about the Holocaust, to hear these vital stories from those who lived through this horrific period and are still here on this earth to tell us about it. Memory is fragile, and we must never forget. But my main goal here is to introduce my colleague, Professor Eliott Lefkovitz, a tremendously talented individual who has worn many hats in his life. During his years teaching at Loyola, Eliott was a welcoming, compassionate, dedicated, and gentle presence on campus, deeply committed to justice and helping his students to see its crying need in our world. Beginning in the mid-1980s, he taught a course on genocide at Loyola, which always filled, and it was last taught before he retired in 2019. But Eliott has done far more than just teach at Loyola. He has served as a leader of his synagogue, Am Yisrael, in Northfield for many years. He's been an active, longtime supporter of the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie since before its founding. He is the author of books on the history of Temple Shalom in Chicago, which is about halfway down Lakeshore Drive if you ride the campus shuttle to our other campus at the Water Tower. He published a book in 1990 titled Dimensions of the Holocaust, which annotated versions of 4 speeches given at Northwestern University, including one by Elie Wiesel. He has worked on films that have preserved for future generations the experience of countless survivors and witnesses to the Holocaust, including the films, quote, The Double Crossing, the story of the St. Louis, end quote, Opening the Gates of Hell, American Liberators of Nazi Concentration Camps, and finally, the film Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass. So thank you, Professor Lefkovitz, for your teaching, your scholarship, and your service to humanity. Please join me in welcoming Professor Lefkovitz.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much, Professor Hunt, and thanks to the History Department for sponsoring this program for many years. I also want to acknowledge James Robuszewski, who is with us today. James Robuszewski is the chair of the board of the Polish Museum of America and vice president of the Polish National American Congress. And he is here in honor of our honored speaker today, Professor George Otto. So I would like to say a few words about Kristallnacht and also about Poland in World War II, and then introduce Professor Otto. We come together annually in early November to remember Kristallnacht, the Night of the Broken Glass, also known as the November 9th and 10th, 1938 pogrom. It marked a key escalation of the Holocaust, the systematic destruction of 6 million European Jews and millions of others by the Nazi German government and its collaborators. Nazism is a fascist variant. The Holocaust is now several generations past, but it must be remembered for what it can teach us about the darkest side of our fellow human beings and how a government can dehumanize an outgroup and mobilize a modern nation's instruments of repression against such a targeted group. The Holocaust provides a striking example of how obedience to a malevolent authoritarian, greed, terror, depraved indifference, and a murderous ideology can bring about the death of millions. And the Holocaust serves as a stark reminder of the hatred known as anti-Semitism, the longest hatred and the longest conspiracy theory. It's now, unfortunately, more mainstream and widespread. The current threats include Holocaust denial and distortion, minimization, the spread of harmful anti-Semitic stereotypes and wild conspiracy theories, the normalizing of Hitler and Holocaust references, and the substitution of the word Zionists for all Jews, making it easier to justify violence against them. The roots of the Holocaust go back centuries in Western civilization, but its immediate cause came into being when Adolf Hitler, the charismatic, ideologically obsessed, anti-Semitic demagogic leader of the Nazi Party, legally came to power in Germany on January the 30th, 1933. Hitler and the Nazis then set about subverting what remained of German democracy by curtailing civil liberties, muzzling the free press, inaugurating a concentration camp system, passing a bill allowing Hitler to rule by decree, and creating a one-party state. Hitler and his minions then set about Nazifying the army, the police, the judiciary, the universities, and the civil service. They incarcerated political enemies, burned banned books, and substituted might makes right for Judeo-Christian ethics and morality. The Nazis sought to create a Führerstaat, a leadership state, based on the Hitlerian cult of personality that demanded loyalty and obedience to the will and dictates of the supreme leader, the strongman. Hitler's primary obsession was creating a racially pure Germany based on pseudoscientific racist eugenics biomedical principles. Some in the United States and elsewhere at the time also embraced these principles. For example, in the forced sterilization of the so-called unfit. Hitler and his minions were also dedicated to the conquest of Lebensraum, living space for the so-called Aryan master race. Nazi goals were reinforced by unrelenting propaganda based on lie after lie after lie, and of course, big lies. From the time of their governmental takeover, the Nazis were determined to rid Germany of their chief ideological racial enemies, namely the supposed parasitic, demonic Jewish anti-race, allegedly engaged in a worldwide conspiracy against them by their presumed control of the governments of the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States. In fact, the Jews constituted less than 1% of the German population at the time. Actually, it was 0.78% of the German population at the time, and had a world population of 16.5 million out of 2.3 billion in Germany. By the way, here it is more than 80 years later, and the Jewish world population today is less than what it was then. It's only a little over 15 million. German Jews were largely middle class, although there were a small number of very wealthy families, as well as many poor Jews. That they were somehow the prime enemies of the Nazis was simply delusional. The chief means used by the Nazis to deal with the Jews was forced emigration and the preaching of self-deportation. This was encouraged by legislation known as the Cold Pogrom. Cold Pogrom meant using the law to exclude and isolate Jews from political, social, and economic life. Some of these laws in the Cold Pogrom were based on Jim Crow laws targeting African Americans being enforced in various American states at the time. The key piece of Cold Pogrom legislation was the Nuremberg Laws, enacted in the fall of 1935. They deprived Jews of German citizenship, they made them subjects, and banned marriage between Aryans and Jews. Jews faced daily acts of humiliation and dehumanization. They were also excluded from the German civil service, from law, from journalism, from university professorships, from the military. They were barred from speaking on the radio, from exhibiting artwork, from attending festivals, from participating in local organizations. In time, all Jews in Germany and the areas it controlled were required to add the name Israel for a man and Sarah for a woman. After 5 years in power and cumulative anti-Semitic radicalization, the Nazis decided to rid the Third Reich of their Jewish enemies once and for all. The need to do so at the time had become more pressing because Hitler had determined on war. He and the Nazis believed that the Jews and others were responsible for German loss in World War I, undermining the war effort, stabbing Germany in the back. By the fall of 1938, the Third Reich also included the Jews of newly annexed Austria and the Czech Sudetenland, given to Nazi Germany as part of the policy of appeasement on the part of Great Britain and France. The official pretext for Kristallnacht was the assassination of Ernst von Rath, an official in the German embassy in Paris, on November the 7th, 1938. The assassin was a Jewish teenager, 17-year-old Herschel Greenspan. He did so in a misguided attempt to avenge the despicable treatment of his parents, who had been forcibly deported from Germany. Von Rath died of his wounds on November the 9th. That night and the next day, the Nazis launched a reign of terror known as Kristallnacht on the Jews under their control. It crossed the line from earlier forms of discrimination to outright physical assault and material destruction, thereby clearly demonstrating the genocidal potential of the Nazi regime. Nazi stormtroopers, SS men, and Hitler Youth, aided by anti-Semitic elements in the population, destroyed or severely damaged some 1,400 synagogues, including Torah scrolls and prayer books, by dynamite and incendiary bombs. Firemen stood by the burning synagogues so that the flames would not spread to Aryan property. The Nazis looted or destroyed some 7,500 Jewish businesses, and their sympathizers also attacked Jewish cemeteries, desecrating graves. Axe and hatchet-wielding assailants invaded Jewish homes. They beat and terrorized their residents and looted their possessions. No Jews were spared, including Jewish senior citizen home residents, Jewish hospital patients, and children in Jewish orphanages. In the city of Königsberg, the Nazis forced the children from a Jewish orphanage out into the street in their nightclothes. In order to warm themselves, the freezing children huddled close to the flames of a burning synagogue. The noted rabbi and philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a seminary student in Berlin at the time, wrote, "The Jewish house of worship is a humiliated ruin. God's ineffable name is lost in darkness. The words dirty Jews written on synagogue window panes go up in flames as the synagogues burn." About 300 Jews were murdered on Kristallnacht. There were also several hundred suicides. The Nazis arrested some 30,000 Jewish males, ages 16 to 60, sent them to Dachau, Buchenwald, and Sachsenhausen concentration camps. This was the first large-scale incarceration of Jews based solely on Jewish ethnicity. Prisoners could be released if they had a valid visa to a country that would accept them. Still, they were brutalized and tormented in the camps, and about 1,000 perished in them. The urns containing the ashes of the deceased were sent to their families, cash on delivery, 3.75 Reichmarks for each urn. In the wake of Kristallnacht, Jews were completely driven out of the German economy and out of all German schools. They were forbidden to drive, forbidden to appear in public. The Nazi government imposed an atonement fine, 1 billion Reichmarks, on the Jewish community. Hermann Goering, then second in command to Hitler, remarked, "The Jewish swine won't commit another murder. Incidentally, I would not like to be a Jew in Germany today." Kristallnacht not only shattered glass, it shattered the hope of any Jewish future in Germany and the areas it controlled. The only hope for persecuted Jewry was to seek foreign refuge, but nearly all countries in the world closed their doors to Jewish refugees. Many were barred from entering the U.S. due to this country's racist immigration quota system. Congress rejected a bill to admit 20,000 Jewish children. Although Great Britain allowed about 10,000 Jewish children to enter, it virtually closed Palestine, which it controlled at the time, to Jewish immigration. Chaim Weizmann, a key Jewish figure then, wrote, "The world is divided into two camps, one that wants the Jews out and the other which will not let them in." Following Kristallnacht, the fate of the Jews under Nazi control passed into the hands of the SS, headed by Heinrich Himmler, Hitler's faithful servant. On January the 31st, 1939, less than 3 months after Kristallnacht, Hitler uttered this chilling, self-fulfilling prophecy: if international Jewry succeeds in plunging the nations into another world war, it will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. Once Hitler, not international Jewry, launched World War II and millions of Jews fell under Nazi rule, forced emigration was no longer possible. The answer became genocide. Its major instrument became the SS, and its cover was the World War. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, began on September the 1st, 1939, with the German invasion of Poland. Great Britain and France declared war on Nazi Germany on September the 3rd. The war lasted 6 years. This year marks the 80th anniversary of its end. The war cost some 60 million dead, most of them civilians, and spurred the creation of atomic weapons, signaling that the next World War could see the near extinction of humanity. So I'd like to turn now to Professor George Otto. It's my privilege to introduce him. Professor Otto is Truman College Professor Emeritus of Business Management and Economics and retired Vice President of the Polish American Congress, Illinois Division. He has also worked tirelessly to strengthen our democracy through active political engagement and through union leadership. Professor Otto has received a number of awards and recognitions for his many accomplishments. He is with us on an auspicious day. Today is not only Veterans Day, the day marking the end of World War I, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. But today is also Polish Independence Day. That marks the rebirth of Polish independence in 1918 with the establishment of the Second Polish Republic, which was one of the results of World War I's end. Poland had been wiped off the map in 1795 as a result of Russian, Prussian, and Austrian aggression. It was reborn as a sovereign nation state in 1918. Professor Otto is a child survivor of World War II. of the World War II Nazi occupation of Poland. He has recently begun sharing his powerful and memorable experiences in local storytelling groups, including a program organized by the Goodman Theater. We are delighted that he has agreed to be with us this afternoon in conversation with highly regarded local journalist, fellow storyteller, and Loyola history graduate, Mary O'Connell. Following as a very brief introduction to Poland during World War II, which is designed to provide some historical context to Professor Otto's personal experiences during that time. Professor Otto was born in Warsaw, Poland, into a Catholic family on December 18, 1929. He had a younger brother, Tadeusz, recently deceased. Professor Otto was 9 years old when World War II began. The British and the French, who had pledged aid to Poland in case of war with Germany, failed to help Poland in any meaningful way. The United States was neutral in 1939. The citizens of Warsaw endured the merciful and unrestrained German bombing of their city, but they, including Professor Otto's parents, heroically sought to defend Warsaw. He has searing memories of this unprovoked assault. In keeping with the Hitler-Stalin Pact, signed just before the German invasion, the Soviet Union invaded and occupied eastern Poland on September 17, 1939. During their occupation, the Soviets murdered some 150,000 Poles, including 20,000 Polish army officers. Unable to resist these two totalitarian powers, Poland was overwhelmed. The war ended in early October 1939 with Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union dividing all of Poland. Hitler's plan for Poland was to annex parts of it to Germany and turn the remainder into a German vassal state whose supposedly racially and culturally inferior Slavic population would serve the German Aryan master race destined to rule the world. The Nazis kidnapped thousands of Polish children who fit Aryan racial characteristics due to their blonde hair or blue or green eyes. This was part of their Lebensborn, their Fountain of Life program. The children were sent to Germany for so-called racial indoctrination in order to become part of the master race. As we will see, Professor Otto was one of these kidnapped children. To eliminate Polish national identity and to thwart resistance to their rule, the Germans began to systematically murder Polish elites. Poland lost 60% of its attorneys, 45% of its physicians, 40% of its university professors, 30% of its scientists and teachers, 20% of its clergy, including several bishops, and untold numbers of journalists and artists. Hundreds of thousands of Poles were brutally displaced from their lands that were annexed to Germany and resettled by ethnic Germans. Tens of thousands of Poles were sent to Auschwitz, Stuttgart, Majdanek, and other concentration camps. German terror, spearheaded by the SS, the Gestapo, and the Waffen-SS military, was unremitting. It included sustained dehumanization, slave labor, and random massacres and executions. Poland was ravaged, looted, decimated. Nevertheless, in response to German atrocities, the Poles organized one of the most effective resistance movements in all of German-occupied Europe. It had both civilian and military sections. The largest of the latter was the Polish Home Army, loyal to the London-based Polish government in exile. The resistance drew support from all segments of Polish society, provided the Allies with valuable intelligence, and even organized a resistance movement in Auschwitz. There was also a Polish army in exile that fought courageously with the Allies in the Battle of Britain, in North Africa, in Italy, and elsewhere. Poland's Jewish community was marked for total extermination. Jews were first subject to random killings and tortures, then herded into ghettos where countless died from diseases and starvation. The largest Polish ghetto was in Warsaw, that at its height imprisoned about 450,000 Jews in a tiny, atrociously overcrowded, totally unsanitary area. Professor Otto's home was close to the Warsaw Ghetto. In April 1943, on the eve of Passover, the remnant of these ghetto Jews rose in armed rebellion against the Nazis and heroically fought for over a month in the greatest example of Jewish armed resistance during the Holocaust. In the Holocaust's final stage, Jews were sent to extermination camps where they were murdered by poison gas. By the end of World War II, the Nazis had killed at least 2 million ethnic Poles and about 3 million Jewish Poles. Half of those murdered in the Holocaust were Jews from Poland. In the summer and fall of 1943, the Polish underground increased its actions in Warsaw and elsewhere, followed by German reprisals. Their mother sent Professor Otto and his brother to a safer location in the Tatra Mountains in southern Poland. They returned to Warsaw in the summer of 1944. Meanwhile, the tide of battle in the Soviet Union turned against the Germans in 1943. The Red Army made steady progress, steady gains. The successful 1944 Red Army offensive brought the Red Army to the outskirts of Warsaw. Beginning on August the 1st, 1944, the Polish Underground Home Army, supported by the Polish government in exile, rose against the German occupiers in a brave but futile effort to liberate Warsaw before the Soviets could do so. It was the largest European underground military uprising in World War II. The Polish uprising lasted until October 1944, when it was crushed by superior German forces. During the insurrection, Stalin halted the Red Army's advance so that the Germans could destroy Polish resistance fighters and thereby more easily enable a Soviet takeover. In a brutal act of reprisal after the Germans had put down the rebellion, the Germans systematically destroyed what remained of Warsaw and deported those residents who had survived. Professor Otto was one of those survivors. He was deported to Czechoslovakia. The uprising is estimated to have cost 250,000 Polish lives. Soviet forces drove the Germans out of Poland and made it part of their empire. The war in Europe ended with German surrender in early May 1945. Professor Otto had no wish to return to communist Poland and escaped into the American occupation zone in Germany. Poland's borders, post-war borders, were significantly altered. Poland lost lands in the east to the Soviet Union and gained German lands in the west, with all the resulting demographic and cultural impacts. Its brave struggle for independence and self-determination continued for several decades under repressive Soviet rule, eventually led by the Solidarity movement and aided by such legendary figures as Pope John Paul II and Lech Walesa. The Republic of Poland was reborn in 1990 with the fall of the Soviet Union. So I would now like to call on Professor Otto and Mary O'Connell. And as a backdrop to the conversation, we'll have, there we go, we will have a montage of Professor Otto's family photos. Thank you very much, Dr. Hunt, for that. Mary O'Connell and Professor Otto, and on the far left is Judy Parker. Judy is an actress, a storyteller, a local tour guide, and she assisted with this presentation. And after the presentation, Judy will help lead a Q&A. So we'll now turn to
All right.
Professor Otto.
Who does it?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? All right.
No, in the back.
Not in the
In the
back?
back? You okay? All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Eliott, for the introduction. Of course, we want to acknowledge that today is also Veterans Day. It is the time when we commemorate those who fought and served and lost their lives in the defense of our country and in trying to address the kinds of things that Eliott was talking about there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. George, let's start with your story in the summer of 1939. You were 9 years old. What were you and your family doing that summer? And did you have any sense that war was coming? What's your memory of how it started?
I was born 1929 and grew up in Warsaw with my father, Edward, Maria, a mother, Leocadia, my younger brother, Tadeusz, and a maid and a dog. Father was some 20 years older than my mother. He was a train conductor for the famous railroad, the Orient Express. He would be away from home for a few days and back for a few days. My mother did not work and was busy volunteering. And she joined the Polish Army Reserve Women Unit training in military communications. Summer in Warsaw was near perfect in 1939. With school closed for vacation, we kids would chase each other, to play games, go fishing in the Vistula River. I decided we should train for the coming Olympics. We would race, jump, and throw stones as far as we could. Meanwhile, the threat of a German invasion of Poland was growing. Both Britain and France promised to come to its defense. The Polish government declared general mobilization. My father was called in for military duty, and my mother reported to the military headquarters in Warsaw, leaving me and brother with a maid. She promised to visit us frequently, so it was. One day she returned and said, "We are going to have fun." We went downtown by a streetcar and bought clothing, shoes, school supplies. She took us to a cafe for ice cream and pastries. We kids were very happy. When we left the cafe, we saw some young hoodlums running on the sidewalk and yelling, "Buy from Jews, they are our enemy." Walking further, we saw other gangs shout, "Kill all Germans, they are coming here to kill us." We witnessed young men beating a man, accusing him of being German spy. Police arrived, and the gangsters appeared. This man on a sidewalk appeared to be dead. A woman was crying, "You killed my husband! Polish patriot! What am I going to do?" "What am I going to tell my children?" My mother shouted, "Hurry up! Let's take a streetcar and leave this crazy place." I said, "Mother, please tell me, what is going on?" Mother replied, "The world is turning mad." She took us home and returned to her duty. Meantime, the Polish Air Force began nightly air rehearsal for the defense of Warsaw. Sirens blared. There were explosions in the distance. It was like watching a circus, more than what we had been doing all summer, kids. Citizens were told to seek shelter in the basement, but most of them ignored that. Instead, they were enjoying the last warm days of summer, attending movies, having dinner, doing chores. I overheard men discussing the possibility of war. The discussion became arguments, and the vodka took over, and the arguments turned physical. I said good night to the debaters, went home to sleep. Then on September 1, I woke up around 4 o'clock in the morning to a very loud noise. Boom, 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 boom. The windows were shattering. I looked outside and saw airplane overheads, one after another, and heard explosion in the distance. Women were setting up an altar on the landing window and praying. Children began to cry. Soon after, mother came and ordered my brother and me, "Get your things together. I'm sending you to grandfather's farm." She took us to the station, put us on a train, and disappeared.
That's good. All right, so your mother sent you to her father's farm to get you away from the fighting in Warsaw. But you saw plenty while you were on the farm, didn't you?
Yeah. Grandfather had a large estate with several buildings and many workers. Our days there were mostly peaceful and boring. At night, the sky turned red and we could hear sounds from the distance. Nearby villages were in fire, but not here. One day around 10 o'clock a.m., we saw German tanks coming down the dusty road. What to do? Grandfather had the answer. Lift your hands and the lead and the lead tank slowly passed by our gate. A soldier in black uniform on top of the tank stood erect, smiled, waved, and waved his hand. So,
A few.
Okay. A few days later, German soldiers appeared, marching towards Warsaw. An officer knocked at her grandfather's door and asked permission to have German soldiers rest here for a few days. To avoid trouble, grandfather gave permission. Days later, more soldiers arrived with the truck. They were inside the barn, selected a cow, loaded it on a truck, and gave Grandma a receipt telling him to redeem it after the war.
Yeah.
Grandfather knew that he would not be paid, but he had no option but agree.
All right. Meanwhile, for Poland, things were very bleak. Tell us about how the fortunes of war affected your family.
On September 17, 1939, the Russian army invaded Poland from the east. The Warsaw garrison left the city and rushed to the Eastern Front. They were replaced by retreating Polish army units from the German front and by local residents. Children would pour turpentine on the ground and then throw matches to blow up German tanks. This halted German advances for a while. But the heroic defense of Warsaw ended late September. The Polish cavalry on horseback with spears was no match for the tanks. The army surrendered. The soldiers laid down their arms. Some escaped and headed for the forest, creating a guerrilla units to continue the fight. Germans lined up the rest and marched them to the station in Pruszków, a suburb of Warsaw, to send them to Germany. My mother had been handling military communication at headquarters during the siege. She was wounded twice, once on her head by a shrapnel, once on her back. Each time she was patched up by the medics and continued her duties. Now she was deported. But as the columns of prisoners were marching towards Pruszków, passing our apartment, mother slipped away and came inside. Guards made no attempt to chase her. She contacted Grandpa and asked him to bring her sons back home. Grandpa mounted horses to his wagon, loaded some food, and the three of us set off on a dirt road. As we came to a highway, we found German soldiers bearing the way. Someone important was coming. After a long wait, we heard a command and saw a limousine approaching. The soldiers rose up, raised their arm, and yelled, "Heil Hitler!" In the limousine stood a man in a brown shirt. Lifting his arm as the car sped by, sitting in our buggy, I had the perfect view. Grandpa said that the man that was in the car was a German chancellor. Chancellor? At my age, at 9 years old, this answer made no sense. Soon after, the soldiers disappeared and we continued our journey. Arriving home in Warsaw, we were welcomed by Mother. Early in October, Father showed up at our door. Now, all four of us were united. Father's employer, the Orient Express, had shut down because of the war, so he was out of work. My parents tried to make a living selling vodka and other spirits on the black market and soon stopped because Mother was scared. Now, Warsaw was part of German-occupied Polish territories known as the General Government. Warsaw inhabitants began clearing the streets and fixing damaged buildings. People had to wait in long lines for food, and a black market developed. But we had food because my grandfather had a farm. The new government ordered all the Jewish population to wear armbands. In 1940, part of Warsaw was designated as a Jewish ghetto and later enclosed by a wall. All others living in that area were required to move elsewhere. My mother had a Jewish tailor. She was afraid to go into the ghetto, so she sent me to sneak in and with clothes for the tailor, and later I would go back to pick up the finished garments. Schools were closed, kids were playing all day long outdoors. I thought it was great. I liked it. When the school started again, we had one additional subject, the German language. Meanwhile, my parents were having marital problems. One day, my mother answered an ad in the paper and was accepted to work in Frankfurt am Main, Germany. I think she was trying to get away from my father. She packed clothing, called me and my brother, and said, I am leaving you, but I promise to be back soon to fetch you. She kissed us and disappeared.
So your mother is working in Germany, and then she comes to take you and your brother back to be with her. So tell us what happened next. And I want to tell people this is a part of the story that really gives you a sense of what kind of person George is.
After a few weeks, my mother returned to Warsaw, picked up my brother and me, and took us with her by train to Frankfurt. We never saw our father again. In Frankfurt, she had one little room with one bed for all three. She enrolled my brother and me in a local public school. We knew very little German, just that what we learned in school in Warsaw. At first, I could not communicate with anyone, but after 3 months or so, was able to keep up. After school, we would come home to an empty room. That was boring, so I ventured outside to explore the neighborhood. Nearby were large department stores where I would play with toys, ride the elevators up and down all day. I never seen anything like that back in Warsaw. We still had horse and buggies. But the arrangement did not work for my mother. So she placed us in a boarding school in the suburb of Frankfurt, Bad Homburg. The school building was locked at all times and the rules were strict. Anyone who disobeyed was punished physically. I had never been exposed to such a stern situation. My parents never beat me. Most Polish parents didn't. When I disregarded some of the rules, the administrators slapped me in the face. They pulled my ears. They beat me with a stick. That was too much for me. One day, when the door was temporarily unlocked, I slipped out and ran away. They never expected this. I borrowed a streetcar, having no money. I sat down next to an old lady and pretended to be asleep. The conductor did not disturb me. Back in Frankfurt, I went to mother's room. When she came home and found me, she was shocked. I recited my story about that nasty boarding school. But next morning, she took me back there and left me. I was in a shock. How could she do that to me? A few days later, I disobeyed again and was beaten again. The next time I found the door unlocked, I ran away again. This time, mother took me to a Catholic orphanage. That place was nice, the nuns very polite, the kids very friendly. However, we all had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, not to go to school, but to pray. I thought that was unnecessary. I should be sleeping, not wasting my time praying. So we walked to school, and that was fine. But returning to the orphanage before bedtime, we had to pray. Guess what? Again. So one day after school, I simply boarded a streetcar and went home to mother. But now she was fed up with me, I guess. I don't know. She did not know what to do with me, so she kept me. Hooray! Now I was happy living with her. That's what I wanted. In time, Mother found another place to stay, a little bigger, with a park nearby. She picked up my brother from Bad Homburg, and the three of us lived together as a family again. We would sometimes go to an outdoor entertainment area near the house. In the summertime, I went swimming in the river Main. In winter, we would skate. I enjoyed her living in Frankfurt by now, but during the Christmas holiday, 1940, despite my pleas, my mother decided to take us back to Warsaw, where she had found a new job in the Warsaw Post Office.
All right, so you're back in Warsaw, but not for long. And this is an especially scary part of the story.
Back in Warsaw, my mother sent us to a new school. One day, the classroom door opened, and in walked the principal, accompanied by two men. The principal said, "We have some visitors here. Please behave." One of the men began to walk to the aisles, observe each student, and pointed a finger at me. They all left, not saying a word. I imagined they were the detectives looking for a felon. A few minutes later, principal came back and whispered to our teacher. The teacher said, "George," followed the principal. I felt alarmed. What did I do he didn't like? I followed him in the office. One of the men introduced himself and began in German. By now I was able to understand. He said, "We are taking you on a trip." I asked, "What trip?" He answered, "You soon will find out." The strangers took me outside to a bus with many other kids inside. We took off, then stopped at two other schools. We all wondered what is going to be next. They took us to a former Warsaw armory. Inside, we were ordered to strip naked, led to a shower. When we returned to pick our clothing and get dressed, the whole room smelled very badly, awful odor. It was gas. We were told this was so none of us would carry bugs on our trips. We can see what the Germans thought of Poles. On the buses again, some kids began to cry for their parents. A man in charge assured us that our parents were notified and nothing bad would befall us. "You will like your new home," he said. We were put on a train, and in the dark, I and many others fell asleep. We came to a station, got off, formed a column, and marched on foot about a mile to our new destination. The place, called Bethlehemstadt, had once been a resort next to a forest. No other buildings nearby, away from civilization. A Hitler-Jugend lad, maybe 18 or 20 years old, was in charge of us. Each morning he had us run a mile or so in the forest, do exercises, and listen to propaganda. We had German lessons. At 12 years old now, I was the youngest of the group. But since I learned German in Frankfurt, I was often asked to translate. Then there were camp rules. Here we go again. I thought some of them were not necessary. I was warned of the consequences, and one day Surprise! I broke one of the rules and was physically punished by our youth leader. I began to look for ways to escape. That was normal for me. But I was living in the forest with no idea where to get home to Poland. So I wrote a letter to Mother. She came to the camp, talked to the administrator, and my physical punishment stopped. One day, a high-ranking commission came to the camp to check up how their progress of converting us into Germans. They asked if anybody had any question. Everyone was afraid to respond, but I was not to be silent. I complained, especially about the Hitlerjugend teacher. After officials left, the teacher beat the hell out of me, but that was the last time. He disappeared soon after, and at the end, maybe he died on the Russian front. I hope so. Too bad.
Okay, so your time in the Nazification program didn't last forever. And meanwhile, in Warsaw, terrible things were happening. Tell us about that.
The battalion camp was liquidated in 1943, and I and other children were repatriated back to Poland. At the station, my mother ran and embraced me and kissed me. Many relatives came to celebrate my arrivals. I felt like a hero. I was happy being home. Mother informed me that times have changed in Warsaw. Jews in the ghetto, desperate being mistreated, obtained arms from the Polish underground and revolted against the German occupier. To put down the revolt, Germans fought fierce battle with the Jews in the ghetto, burning down the buildings with flamethrowers. Those Jews who survived were transported to concentration camps. Meanwhile, the Polish underground was active. They would enlist young girls to flirt with German soldiers. When one of the partisans would sneak behind and disarm or kill them to get their guns, they had no guns underground, not enough. The Germans retaliated immediately against innocent people. They would stop a streetcar between stations, order all men to exit the tram, load them in trucks, and take them away. Then Germans would circulate leaflets listing their names and announce the date and place of execution. On that date, as relatives and friends watched, the German soldiers placed the arrested men against the house wall, opened fire, and killed them, leaving relatives to pick up their bodies. Today, throughout the city of Warsaw, you can find many houses, tablets commemorated such an event. One day, I heard music and saw a German funeral procession outside my house. Suddenly, someone rolled a grenade along the streetcar rails and towards the procession, and there was a huge explosion. I ran out fast as I could into the house and closed the door. I knew if they saw my face, they would come and get me. Death was lurking everywhere in Warsaw. Mother started looking again and found a safe place for us. Private school in the high Tatra Mountains in Krakow. My brother and I enjoyed the school. On the nice days, we would climb, play games, take hikes. During winter, we used skis to get everywhere. When the school closed for vacation in July 1944, we went back to Warsaw to what?
All right, so by the summer of 1944, the tide of war had turned decisively against Nazi Germany. The Polish underground determines to drive the Germans out of Warsaw before the Russians could occupy it, because they really didn't want the Russians there. Tell us what you experienced and how, once again, you got separated from your family.
The Warsaw Uprising began in August 1944. At first, it made real progress, but soon the rebels were retreating. In September, German soldiers arrived in our neighborhood. They shouted, "Raus! Raus! Get out! Get out!" We left the apartment and assembled on the street. Then we were made to walk under guard to Prushkov station. Here, men, women, and children were separated. I was loaded on a train and sent to Sudetenland, the part of Czechoslovakia occupied by Hitler in 1938. I'm now 14 years old, and the boy 16 dropped off at a small farm owned by an old woman where we harvested potatoes. When the harvest ended, my friend disappeared and I was reassigned to a German army barracks, a resting place for soldiers from the collapsing Eastern Front. Every few days, some left, the others arrived, exhausted, telling horrible stories about the Russian front. I was assigned to keep the barracks fires going. So I soon realized that none of the soldiers really knew what my duty was. So I would sneak out, take a train to Prague or Pilsen, check in with the Red Cross, and offer to help distribute food to German soldiers in transit. I made a few rounds distributing food through the open train windows, stole the rest, and took off. I snuck in to see a movie and then returned to the barracks. No one missed me. One day, as the Russian advanced, the German soldiers disappeared. Czech mobs began to loot the empty barracks. I found a good pair of boots. I took off my old boots, completely worn out, put on the new one, and left. Having heard bad stories about Russian rule in Poland from the grandfather and mother, I decided to head towards Germany. On my way, I found a deserted house in a nice resort area called Babylon and started staying nights there, sleeping on the floor. There was no furniture, all was stolen. I befriended many Czech people and they helped me with food. One of them was the mayor of the town, who was also a barber. He cut my hair.
All right. Now we come to the spring of 1945 and the final months of the war in Europe. And I want to remind listeners that George was 15 at this point. Tell us about your experiences as the war was coming to a close and its immediate aftermath.
One day, I was on my way, on a road looking for food. I heard a machine gun firing and saw United States Air Force planes attacking a train marked with Red Cross signs, with empty shells falling all around me. When I got to the train, I found many German soldiers injured or dead. There was nothing for me to do there. I didn't care. They didn't have food for me, so I continued walking to town, enter a bakery, and beg for bread. The woman behind the counter finally gave me some, and I started back to Babylon. Next house where I was staying, I saw another U.S. Air Force plane attacking two German trucks. I ran to the trucks and found them full of food. Soon people appeared and began to help themselves. I joined them, taking chocolates and canned foods. The Germans on the truck who had survived the attack stood by, shocked, not saying anything. Maybe a day or two later, a U.S. Air Force plane struck a freight train. Again, hungry people rushed up and helped themselves to the food inside. I took 5 pounds cans of sardine, a big box of bread, and a 5-pound of honey. Another day, I took a canoe from the resort and out on the lake. Suddenly, shells were falling around me, lifting a geyser probably 50 feet high, and that fish was all around me in the lake. So, a few hours later, I heard a roar from the highway and saw U.S. tanks. Behind the tanks was the infantry on foot. Hooray! At this time, this happened very quickly. All this. The war ended on May 5th, 1945. In Babylon, U.S. Army tanks parked in front of 2 huge resort hotels, kicked out the occupants, and took over. I went to check on my new guests. A U.S. soldier stopped me and asked me what I was doing here. Knowing a little English, I started to answer when I heard some passing U.S. soldiers speaking Polish. Maybe they were from Chicago. I turned around and spoke to them in Polish. Surprised, they asked me, "What are you doing here in Babylon, far from home?" I said, "I'm a refugee." They invited me to join them for lunch and asked me many questions. We talked for hours. Babylon became a spa again. The Americans set up R&R station. I went there every day, watching movies and playing ping pong with the GIs. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you're not bad.
Meantime, Czechoslovakia had become an independent country again. All borders were closed. The U.S. Army packed up and left. When I came back the next day, they were gone. It never occurred to me that U.S. Army would play a trick on me, deserting me. Maybe they told me, but I didn't hear. One day, 3 Polish Jews appeared in Babylon heading for Palestine. The border guards would not let them through without a pass. They called on the mayor for help. The mayor, who also was my barber, brought them to me and said, "George, take them over the border a few miles from here. There's a United Nations refugee camp inside Germany. Use the secret path in the forest. You know the route." I replied, "I will not. I like it here." The mayor continued, "George, I have an order on my desk. to repatriate you to Poland. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but the threat changed my mind. And it occurred to me I should get out of here before being sent back to the communist-controlled Poland. I heard that all kinds of bad things were taking place there. So I agreed to take them, that means they were Jews, and early next morning we set off. We were walking throughout the dense forest when we ran into Czechoslovakian border guards. I think they were surprised to see us, and we were surprised to see them. I shouted to my companion, "Let's run after me." One of the guards began to shoot. I'm not sure he meant to. Fortunately, none of us was hit. We kept walking, got lost, walked out of our way, got drenched in a thunderstorm. Finally, we came to an opening in the forest where we could see farmhouses. But where were we? One of the men said, "Wait, let me sneak near one of the buildings and find out." He came back and told us we were in Germany, the American occupied zone. Hooray for trace! We knocked at a farmhouse door. The farmer was terrified because there had been so much violence. But we told him we just wanted a place to sleep and some food. He let us sleep in the barn, fed us, and the next morning sent us off in the right direction. We arrived at the United Nations refugee camp in the evening, had a shower, and a nice dinner. We were safe. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, go.
All right. So, we're gonna have some questions, and if anybody has a question, but I'm gonna ask the first one. Why did you come to America? Did you get influenced when you were staying with those American soldiers?
No, there was a big trek. I went from place to place, from one camp to another United Nations camp. And finally, I landed in a United Nations camp in Italy. There, I signed up to go to Canada. And so they signed me in and put me on a boat from Italy to through Atlantic to Halifax, Nova Scotia. In a way of going there, there was a hurricane. I don't know why. We were going up and down the boat. The boat sank in the front and the back came in, or vice versa. I was completely sick, but safely arrived in Halifax. There was a train. Well, first of all, there was a police or whatever, immigration people. They made some papers. I was formal immigrant to Canada. And so I went, shall I continue?
Yeah, sure.
And so I went to Canada and I signed to work in a gold mine. It came to my mind, I'm going to be rich. So I went to Dennis, Ontario, and went to gold mine. In a gold mine, we had to go to a place where we changed our clothing. Then we were going underground, anyway, with different levels, from several hundred feet to 7,200 feet down in the earth and looking for gold. Instead of finding gold, there was a rock. We had to dynamite this thing, remove this thing, cut the rock, and put on a little train. Sometimes I was the driver, sometimes I was in the back, and pick up the ore, dynamite it the night before, and loaded it, and drive the stuff to a shaft that going up and down, converted to taking rocks up in a level, then they will drop everything mechanical that was there, and on the little railroad going to Melter, and there they separated gold from the rocks and so on, and put in bricks and sold to whoever wanted to buy.
And now you're rich.
It's not no richer than I am.
All right. Does anybody have a question? Just raise your hand. The lady in the way back.
For your story, did you always get contact brothers, or did you have to find each other?
How did you find Tadeus, your brother, after the war?
After the war. Well, he was another camp in Germany, and he remained there after I was in. I wrote letters to my relatives in Poland, so we were in contact, and he was in contact. So he came, he decided to go to Poland because he chose to go to Poland. Got on a train going to things. Went to Poland, couldn't find any relatives, only ruins. So he came back again. There were trains, Germans were thrown out from Poland, so he got on a train and they dumped him on a center. When he was, so I learned where he was and he knew where I was. We were in contact with letters writing.
Oh, okay.
Oh, by the way, 1 second. And I brought him. I paid his trips. He came to my gold mine, and I told him, forget gold. You're not going to work there. I gave him some money, sent him to Toronto, and he got the job there.
So that is that's you got those pictures from your relatives.
Yeah. Well, I was in contact, as I said, with my relatives, and they had a picture, so they sent me some old one because I had nothing for a long, probably for a year. I only had a cloth on my back, nothing else. I changed the shoes at the German soldier camp.
But you did pretty good without money. Wow, how did you do that?
Oh, without money, very easy. And as they say in Warsaw, that they are kind of kids can learn all tricks. When I went to school, for instance, my parents gave me money for the streetcar. I spent on the streetcar. I just work so, and when the conductor was coming my way, I was going the other way, and so I saved the money. Well, afterwards, for chocolate or whatever, that was easy.
Any other questions? Whatever. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thank you for sharing so vividly your vivid narration. You were aware, like with the liquidation of the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw, of this treatment and murder of Jews. Were there rumors of mass extermination of Jews? Did you hear any rumors like that?
Did you hear any rumors
after
of mass exterminations in the concentration camps? Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did. But I didn't recognize, I didn't care. When I was immediately, after Germans came in, a cousin of ours well, not immediately, maybe as a month, few, 2, 3, 4. The cousin was standing on the street, and when Germans were going up and down, he was yelling at them and cussing them. So they grabbed him, and he landed in Auschwitz. And soon after, some bugs came in, powdered, and they said that he died of whatever, and he was gone.
Ah, oh my goodness. Okay.
Did your mother survive the war?
Did your mother, did you meet up with your mother after the war?
After the war, well, the situation is she was in Dresden during the attack. They came to Dresden and other things, and they were bombing the zone. She survived this thing and was there. She was writing letters to my relatives. I was writing to my relatives, so we kind of found ourselves. I discovered that she was in Canada in the eastern provinces there and doing something. So she, when she learned where I was, she came in oh, by the way, I told you I was in Toronto. She came to Toronto and we united in Toronto.
Wow, wow, wow.
Stay there? Did your mother stay there?
Did she continue living in Canada?
She continued to live in Canada and she died in Canada because from Canada, there were some problems with me, my problems with education. And Canada, at that time in Toronto, there was only one university. I applied to get on there. They said that I was a good candidate, but unfortunately, they had to cut off, and I was cut off. I got angry.
Oh, no.
And I told to my buddy, one buddy, and he said, look, they don't want any DPs. They are English and Scottish, Welsh, whatever it is. They don't want you because there's not enough place for everybody. So I got angry, went to Toronto, US things, and want to go to the United States because one of my friends told me, you're never going to be admitted to the university. Go to United States. You can have a choice. So that's why I applied and I got. In 2 weeks, I was surprised that I got a permit to go permanently to United States. By now, I was married a lady and had a child.
Right here.
Yes. This guy here. And letting him in the back seat, took some things, sold others or gave away. Well, some of them for my mother-in-law, she took whatever I left and came to Toronto and landed. Somebody told me there's a large Polish community here. So I drove things, the Polish circle, that means Ashland, triangle. And see the sign saying for rent. So I went there and rented a room on Beach Street in Ashland. I don't know if you know that. And that was not the Polish area, that was Puerto Rican area, but you didn't know nothing. And we had no furniture, nothing. So we slept on the floor. So I got a job at International Harvester and came one day home. Furniture was in the house. My wife went and discovered you can get it for nothing.
What?
All you have to do is sign the paper. I said, well, how were we paid? But that's okay. I changed job. I immediately applied to get the junior college or whatever, Chicago, and took courses and went to Roosevelt University, got a bachelor's, a master, go to IIT, got two PhDs. So that's not the end. That's not the end. I thought the teachers, the professor had a good job. So what did I do? I applied to it, and I had some help from the teachers inside. So I applied, and I was a professor. I got promoted. Things, and I joined the union.
All right.
And they elected me president of the union. I led 3 strikes. Against
Gosh, oh my goodness.
yeah, let's and well, I then from there on, I was applying for all kinds of things from the great U.S. government or schooling, because I read you can get this, that. I got Heinz Fulton job. What? Fulton,
Right.
yeah, program. And I was sent to Poland visiting all the universities. So we wandered for 6 weeks. Took the one, Loyola, and the Gdańsk, and Poznań, and a few, and Warsaw, of course. And so I was there. Then I got another year. I got an opportunity. I had to apply to go to Germany to teach for our school. School. Anyway, so I went there to teach the army, and I went to a university, Heidelberg University. They gave me courses to teach there, so I knew German, but all the courses were delivered at that university. Guess what? English. Because the students were from, I don't know, probably from up there, anyway, from all over the world, including American students.
Oh my goodness.
So,
George, you are a smooth operator.
I learned.
I know.
I got experience.
Yeah, when you would say you would be staying in a house, you would just go in and you'd be in a house by yourself.
Of course.
Yeah.
You meant
No,
Czechoslovakia?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, when I got to Babylon, there were many Germans, more Germans than Czechs, because the area changed from one area to another, and people were killing each other. They were killing. So when I was from Timmins, Domaślice, to that Babylon, houses were completely empty. So I chose one. Nobody was there because the Germans either were killed or they were run away to Germany 10 miles away. Not difficult, few hours they were over the border. So I was staying there. I never changed any clothes because the only clothes I had was on my back. I was an easy transporter.
And how did you eat when you were by yourself?
When I give you one example. I went when that shooting at the Domaślice Timmins was. I went to a bakery, as I mentioned, and I went and I asked for some bread. I'm hungry. Give me bread, something to eat. The lady said, "Are you crazy? You don't have any coupons or whatever."
Rations.
I said, I added, I don't even have the money to pay for it. So they say, out you go. I went, there was a chair. I went and sat down. They asked me a few times, to get out. I didn't move. Finally, they gave me some breath and say, get out. I said, thank you very much.
Anybody got a question? Yeah, you right there.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, and you're a blessing to us to be here and share it. When you characterize what you saw in that youth camp, the Nazification camp,
The Hitler Youth Camp, the camp with the Jugend.
The big camp.
to propaganda, how did you as a 12 or 13-year-old, how did you recognize it was propaganda?
Remember when they'd make you stand up in line, like you'd have a lineup after you in the Hitler Jugend. He made you run, exercise, and then you stand.
You mean the school that converted me to things? Well, so what is the question about the school?
No, because she was saying that. How did you know it was propaganda?
Well, it was obvious. It was obvious, but I was the only one who could understand. But they gave us teachers to teach German and history, and that the guy with the uniform, the 20-year-old, he thought he was a god, and he was things. So he had, yeah. So he had to do it. Yeah.
So.
And I knew, recognized propaganda because they were teaching how great Hitler was and this and that and all kinds of things. Most of the students wouldn't understand. They never know what they were talking about.
Anybody? Question? Well, I just want to tell you, because we are supposed to learn our history so that we don't repeat it. And, George tells his stories and it's very important to him. I just want you to know that he's a big protester. And we have people right here that he protests with and hands out his signs. Yeah, you have a sign. We have Holly, don't you have a picture of him with the flag?
Oh, the flag is one of the good things.
So
twice a week, I am once on Sheridan Road and another one
on Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Pratt. Yeah, during rush hour.
During the rush hour, yes. Morning show on Sheridan, afternoon. Tell them how are you, because I recognize my person.
Okay. Anybody else, sir? Question? Yes, right here.
What happened to your father?
What?
What happened to your father? You lost contact.
I mentioned it here. Well, let's say father and mother didn't get along. So the reason mother went to Germany to escape him, he didn't know when. She get them. She went first to Germany, and then I got some things. Came back, got us, and we disappeared. So nobody around knew where we went.
There was somebody else around here. Oh, you were, yeah. What made you interested in business and economics, even though you were supposed to be a millionaire with the gold, right?
Well, you already answered. I want to be millionaire. Yeah. So no, I promised my mother when I was young, close, that she wanted me to become an engineer building ships. I said, I took her engineering courses, but that was boring. That was boring. I got a job later on by Kellogg, International Telephone and Telegraph, on a job, the rocket business. When the Russians came in Sputnik, they hired people they hired me. I was there, a small job. Pretty soon I was I was running that place because to build those things, Boeing, there were about two different companies building those rockets, Atlas and Minuteman. And then I changed jobs because they ran out of jobs, so I was dismissed. I had to look for another one.
The country. George, oh, there's a, okay, question?
Yeah. My pleasure.
I wanted to, bring info about the call visibility.
Uh-huh.
The one is on Friday, you shall confirm, but more fun.
No. Okay, it's Friday morning at 7:30 to 9:30. It's like Sheridan and like Estes, something like, yeah, you move, okay, around that area. And then Thursday is 4 to 6.
3:30 to.
Oh, 3:30 to 5. Okay, Pratt and Ridge.
You can see me with a flag waving.
Right. I know, George, you are so shy. And
I'm not sure.
so I just want you to know, when you go to his house, he has pictures of himself with President, let's see, Clinton, Carter.
Oh, for the
Or
one,
before.
because I was involved in politics. I initiated some laws, like for instance, Poland's entry into NATO. I was involved in. I was not the only one involved in this thing, and the president of Poland gave me the highest for my job because Poland was admitted to NATO, and you know who runs NATO? U.S.
So he has
Figured
pictures
you
with
would.
Lech Walesa
Yeah.
and
Nancy
Nancy
Pelosi,
Pelosi,
Jan
Jan
Schakowsky,
Jan
Schakowsky.
Schakowsky,
Mayor Washington.
Mayor Washington, Mayor Daley.
Dozens and dozens more politicians. I was just well,
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
George Herbert Walker
Yeah.
Bush. Okay.
Yeah.
I had with one of the president. I was in a room alone with his wife and my wife, and we were for half an hour talking there privately. The guards were outside the door.
All right, thank you. Oh, wait.
I have to. So
And Congress, Illinois division.
Uh-huh.
Polish American Congress, Illinois division, Ewa.
Come, I cannot hear very well.
Sorry. Dzień dobry, hi.
Ewa. Polish American Congress Illinois.
Do I know you?
Yes, you know me very well.
I'm working with Dr. George for quite a few years in Polish American Congress, Illinois division. And just this year, he received from Polish American Congress, Illinois division,
Right.
Legacy Award. I am the vice president, first vice president there. But this man, in his age, he's helping us so much. Even preparing for anything, setting up tables for anything. At his age, I mean, it's something else.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm George.
read him. Heritage, you have an announcement. Very much.
Such an honor to hear you speak today. It was such an honor to hear you speak.